international workshop on how to bring entrepreneurship culture into the university. So I would like to start with inviting Professor Isabel Nunes, who is the sub-director of our faculty, to welcome you all. Yes, please. Please.
It's for recording, yes. Sorry.
So if you just pin it.
So you think? No telemóvel?
Okay.
Tá bom? Okay. Okay. Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you in the name of our Dean, Professor Fernando Santana, which is in a meeting in our rectorate, so he is not available to be here, so he asked me to come here to welcome you to our school and to this workshop. I would like to congratulate Professor Antonio Grillo, my colleague, for being the coordinator of this project, DigiStart, and for all the organization. I think Anish is also that is from our research unit. So the entrepreneurship topic is very important for our school. I don't know if you know, but 4 years ago, FCT has started a new curricular profile that we call FCT curricular profile, where the students, our graduate students, our master students, have a course on entrepreneurship. So every year we have around 1,000 students enrolled in that course, and in groups of 5 they develop ideas and start some projects. We have around 500 ideas per year and 2,200 project proposals per year. So our school believes that besides the high quality education, we think that entrepreneurship give the right tools to the students to have the proper skills to start their own startups. And we believe that the conjunction of high quality education and these soft skills create good professionals, or great professionals for the working world. So I would like to once more welcome you to be here and have a nice and productive workshop, and I hope that you have a nice afternoon in our school. So good work here.
Okay, so good afternoon to all. Welcome to FCT. As Professor Isabel said just a while ago, this is something that is important for our faculty, and we have been pushing forward the entrepreneurship culture within the university and across universities, or within the faculty and across the university as much as possible, although it's not usually easy. And the main reason is this is an engineering and science faculty, meaning that most students here don't know what a product is. Students know about algorithms, they know about technology. The same goes with professors. They know about technology, they know about algorithms, they know about models, but there is a big difficulty to make this change, or this cultural change to being more into the market. So Professor Isabel Weistin just spoke a while ago how it started in FCT. So it started with a major change in the profile of our curriculum in the FCT for engineering and science courses. So the vision of the director, that was the dean at that time, put forward the need to develop an entrepreneurship course. And the head of our research unit and our department, that actually belongs also to Professor Isabel and mine department, Professor Virgílio Machado, that is unfortunately not here today because he had already an appointment somewhere else in abroad. And they designed a program, a course to 1,000 students. And they had to also gather some professors in order to teach these entrepreneurial skills to master level students. And that was a big challenge, both for professors and also for students. Professor Isabel already spoke about the numbers. I can tell that for us it's challenging trying to teach 1,000 students, but it was a success. It was 4 years ago. The landscape of entrepreneurship was quite different at that time. That led us to go forward, and Professor Virgílio Machado also pushed forward the thinking about how can we take this entrepreneurial culture further than just courses. And of course, we started with making these courses a regular thing, so every year this course now is mandatory for all master level students, first year master level students. And we are also thinking now about, in this ecosystem with the Pt.1, developing a post-graduation, so that is offered beyond the boundaries of the faculty. And also this entrepreneurial culture seeks to fostering and leveraging startups. So we are trying to, from some of the ideas that come up in these courses, but not only from research, from general ideas that the students might have, try to support them, trying to nest them, and of course we have the incubator. But for those that are used to these entrepreneurial ecosystems, they know it's often harder to take from an idea to actually starting a startup. And so we are trying to provide this environment for students and for professors and researchers to develop their startups. Of course, research is also very important. We are academics. We need to understand better what's happening. And the research that we are trying to do at the moment is basically trying to have a clear picture of what this entrepreneurial culture is, what these ecosystems are. And of course, we are very much looking for work that has been, research that has been done for NEST, and then in a while we're going to have a keynote by Chris. And of course, we want to liaison with the other research that has been done, or is being done in Europe. And of course, DigiStart project has a pin in these research areas. And of course, one of the main goals that we are trying to strive in the last few years is to liaison with the ecosystem, not only the local ecosystem, the Lisbon ecosystem, that's of course very important, but also with other ecosystems. And this is important because often universities say that they are apart from what's happening within the industrial and service ecosystems. So we don't want to be that type of university. We want to be very close with the startup and digital startup ecosystems, and then we, of course, within the Lisbon ecosystem, we're trying to bring all these pieces together. Just to finalize it, because we are running a little bit out of time, why we are here. We are here because this initiative is within the scope of the European project, Startup European project DigiStart. And DigiStart has different objectives. The main objective and the overall goal is to connect Lisbon ecosystem with other ecosystems, in particular with the Malmo ecosystem that we have a partner in Clusterland that is represented here by Michael, but also through London ecosystem, through particularly our partner FCX, that actually is not particularly from London. It's for all Europe and across the world, but it's actually UK-based and London-based. But within our project, we have been developing different type, or we are developing different type of solutions, services, and so on. So we are trying to foster students to engage more in the ecosystem. And we're trying to do this with the open applications. We are trying to develop a set of resources, MOOC-based resources that anyone can use to deliver courses post-graduation. So these are open and freely available in our repository. And of course, we are designing these courses for different types of digital entrepreneurship. We have also, based on F6S platform, the Talent Forum, so we're trying to develop this, engage with also within the ecosystem. And remember, one of the important things is bringing all these people together. Different ecosystems, different partners, people that usually are separated. And this is very important for us. And within this, we are also developing together with the Pt.1, the Student Support Center, and we are making a liaison with the initiative of Pt.1, Beta Start, that is a pre-accelerator that tries to give more hands-on approach to students that really are willing to engage in developing a startup, and they need initial proof of concept. They need to initially have some evaluation about their ideas. Of course, research, we already spoke about it. We wanted to understand, further understanding about what this digital entrepreneurship is all about, because everybody talks. Everybody, or at least the people that are engaged, know what it is, but if you want to explain to students, it's damn hard, because it's so many things happening at the same time, and what's the reality of today is so different from the reality from 1 year ago, 2 years ago, or 4 years ago when we started, that we're trying to develop some academic-based tools that can help educators to teach the academic community what this phenomenon is all about. So, not going to delay anymore. Just want you to have to give you a warm welcome, and enjoy, of course, being here. Okay, and that's Anish.
Thank you, Professor. So I would like to invite Christopher from Nesta. Nesta, for all those who you don't know, is an organization based in London, and they have done a lot of research work with regards to the ecosystem and the evolving nature of startups. So I will hand over the stage to you. You can please keep it because for recording purposes.
Get my slides. Can I have a clicker or not? No, it's okay.
Just press this button.
So hi, good afternoon everyone. So as Anish said, my name is Chris Haley. I'm Head of Startup Research at Nesta. Nesta is the UK's Innovation Foundation. Before that, however, I worked for 10 years at Imperial College London, one of the UK's big research-intensive universities. And my role there was initially in the Technology Transfer Office, and then a few years looking at enterprise strategy, trying to make the university as a whole more entrepreneurial. The first thing I'd like to say is thank you very much for the invitation to speak here today. I much appreciate it. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about two things: why I think we should care about university entrepreneurship, and then what I think we should do about it. So what do you think about when someone mentions university entrepreneurship? If I were giving this talk in the UK, people would probably think about the kinds of companies that we've got here. A few of these, Circassia, you can see there in the middle left, was an Imperial startup, so was Cirrus Power. These are all university startups in the UK, but I dare say that to you they will probably mean not very much at all, unless you happen to be in those sectors. What about these firms? I expect these are probably rather more familiar to you. And I think often when we talk about university entrepreneurship, it's these kinds of organizations that spring to mind. But more often than not, when we talk of university entrepreneurship, one firm in particular is spoken about, and that's Google. So as is well known, Google started in 1995 as a research project between Brin and Page when they were students together at Stanford. Then the university owned the IP, the page ranking algorithm, and Google paid Stanford in shares for that algorithm. And then Stanford made a whopping 338 million from those shares when Google floated. So is this a motivational story about how universities can make millions from startups? Actually, I'm going to tell you no. I'm going to say to you that that money is a really bad reason to care about university entrepreneurship. Okay, why do I say that? Well, the next slide explains why. So this shows the cashed-in equity from spin-outs from the world's leading universities over a period of 20 years. And the message here really is a very simple one, that Google is unique. Google is quite definitely an outlier in terms of university startups. The past few decades of tech transfer have not produced anything comparable to Google. So basing your university strategy on the hopes of replicating the next Google is quite clearly rather foolish. Now, even if you expand your analysis to include licensing as well as startups, the picture is not very much more encouraging. Repeated analyses show that universities really struggle to make money from commercialization of technologies. Okay, study after study really saying that although a few universities make a lot of money, the vast majority struggle actually even to break even. So the message I'm trying to get across here is that it shouldn't be about the money, at least not from the university's perspective. So why then should we care about university entrepreneurship? So I think there are good reasons from at least 4 different perspectives. First, let me talk about the academics. So this is one of our academics from Imperial, Professor Molly Stevens, Professor of Biotechnology. Not every academic wants to be an entrepreneur, and we definitely should not force them. But I've worked with academic entrepreneurs for over a decade, and the vast majority tell me that entrepreneurship has given new meaning to their research, enabling them to see the bigger picture. Commercialization has increased their motivation and often given them new ideas. A few did become very wealthy in the process, but generally that's not the primary benefit. Here, by the way, are a few genuine quotations from academic entrepreneurs about their experience. As it illustrates, I think many felt that it was their duty to get the research out of the labs into the wider world, and that commercialization was a very important mechanism for doing that translation. The first quotation I think is particularly interesting. I don't know if you can read that at the back, but it's an example almost of a reluctant entrepreneur who did it because there was no other way in which he could help his patients. So that's one set of constituents, academics. Let me talk about a second set, students. In the UK, 55% of 16 to 25-year-olds say that they want to launch a startup. Now, university is one of the most supportive environments that you're ever going to encounter for creating a startup. It's a highly networked environment, tons of resources. Typically, students are still at a stage in their life, pre-marriage, pre-kids, pre-family, pre-mortgage. It really is the best time in your life to actually try and start a company. Entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship education is very much in students' interests. Entrepreneurship support obviously increases the options available to students, and entrepreneurship education has repeatedly been shown to increase employability. So even if one accepts that the majority of ventures will fail, and they will, we shouldn't get away from that fact. The hard lessons of failure can of themselves be of considerable value in providing the real-world experience that many employers say is lacking in today's graduates. Incidentally, I'm not aware of any evidence whatsoever which shows that entrepreneurship detracts from core studies, and that is often one of academics' fears, that this is somehow going to reduce grades. I don't think there's any evidence of that at all. In fact, it may actually be the reverse, that demonstrating the potential for commercial exploitation may provide additional motivation for students. So I've spoken about 2 constituencies, staff and students. Now, what about the universities and colleges themselves? So I would argue that caring about entrepreneurship, especially student entrepreneurship, is in universities' interests, particularly recruitment interests. All the universities want to attract highly motivated, independent thinkers. However, as costs rise and as attitudes change, students are increasingly scrutinizing the services that universities might once have considered as peripheral. More students feel that they want or need to carve out their own opportunities after graduation rather than relying on the traditional job within a large company. And such students are increasingly looking towards entrepreneurial support that the university offers as part of their decision making. So as a result, I would argue that institutions which treat student entrepreneurship as an afterthought will find that they lose out to other more developed ecosystems when it comes to really recruiting those highly motivated, talented students. It may also be in universities' financial interests, despite what I said earlier. So hard-nosed bursars and CFOs who are worried about the costs of supporting student entrepreneurship should note that alumni entrepreneurs are usually the single biggest category of philanthropic donor, but only if they feel that the university has contributed in some way to their success. So interestingly, there's anecdotal evidence from a number of US universities indicating that philanthropic donation back from alumni entrepreneurs in some cases massively outweighs the value of staff entrepreneurship and licensing. So if that is the case, then I would say that universities should be putting in equivalent amounts of resources into the student entrepreneurship system as they do the staff entrepreneurship system. And certainly in the US, that funding of the staff entrepreneurship system can run into millions, and I think we should be devoting similar resources to the student side. So I've spoken about three sets of stakeholders: staff, students, colleges. Fourthly, I'm going to say it's in the national interest. Now, forgive me, I'm a Brit, I come from London, this is a picture of London. In the UK, the Social Market Foundation, which is another think tank, has noted that those educated to degree level or above are twice as likely to become high-value entrepreneurs as non-graduates. So the high-value entrepreneurs they defined as those who are particularly likely to grow and scale a business and contribute most to economic growth, as well as building a kind of economic resilience within the economy. And the cumulative economic impact of these startups is not insignificant. So referring to that first slide, I pointed out a company called Circassia. That currently has a market cap of over 1 billion euros. That's just one company. That's a tremendous amount of value creation for the economy as a whole, whether or not the university itself sees much of that value. UK spin-outs currently employ over 40,000 individuals. So just in terms of job creation, this is a significant movement. But the story is not just about startups. So for every student who becomes an entrepreneur, many more will become intrapreneurs, taking on innovative roles in large firms. Now, I don't especially like that word, but the concept I think is a very important one. We need to create a generation of people who can drive innovation within big businesses. A generation of people who can identify problems without being told and who can seize the initiative in creating solutions, innovative solutions to those problems. Productivity for most European firms is less than in the US, and whilst there are many possible reasons for that, difference in innovation capacity is part of that reason. Now, this really is an important point. All across Europe, we desperately need our universities to revitalize our economies. Universities are no longer monasteries. They should not be islands of esoteric knowledge isolated from society. Rather, they must be engines of economic growth, and they must be seen to be fulfilling this role in order to demonstrate their continuing relevance to government and taxpayers. So, I've given you, I hope, 4 reasons why I think this is important. So what should we do about this? First, what about staff entrepreneurship? So actually, I won't say a great deal about staff entrepreneurship because many universities, particularly in the US, have been doing this for very many years. So look at Wisconsin, WRF was set up in 1925. MIT has had a tech transfer operation since the 1940s. There are a lot of examples of good practice out there. And organizations like the AUTM and ASTP Proton are very much dedicated to promoting that good practice. And I know that there is a tech transfer office here, and I'm sure that they are well connected with those organizations. But speaking in general terms, I would say that the first step for any organization should be to understand how entrepreneurship fits into the mission of that organization and clarify what it wants to achieve. So I think for me, mission comes before strategy, which comes before policies and process. And different missions lead you down different paths. MIT, for instance, is highly supportive of commercialization, but it takes a relatively hands-off approach. So rather than doing the process of company formation by itself, it gives academics the tools to do that, and that's quite different in many other organizations. Interestingly, MIT is an example of a university which takes a very wide perspective of entrepreneurship. So part of the reason they encourage lots of startups is that they know that large firms are attracted to startups, and that they know that by creating this ecosystem of small companies around the university, they will bring in large firms who will then actually collaborate with the university and bring more money into the university through joint research and other collaboration. Related to mission is buy-in. So it is vital, it is absolutely vital that the senior leadership of an institution understands and supports the mission. If your rector and the heads of department don't back academics, then academics will sense that and they will respond accordingly. After buy-in, I would examine incentives. So financial incentives like funding equity and bonuses for academics for patents, for instance. They're important, but it's worth mentioning that in my own studies, relatively few academics mention money as the primary motivation, at least the first time around. The second time around, they were more interested in becoming multimillionaires from their business, but the first time around, actually, what people cared more about was recognition and prestige and things like that. Some of the most positive examples here come, for instance, from universities like the University of Texas, which explicitly recognizes entrepreneurship activities in its promotion criteria. So it doesn't just look at numbers of publications. It's important, too, to give academics time to pursue their own interests. So many universities in the US and Imperial give 20% of academics free time to whatever they want, whether it's a startup or consulting or something else. And promoting the visibility of successful academic entrepreneurs as role models and as departmental champions also has a significant benefit in terms of stimulating other academics to do the same. I think that there's a lot more that we could talk about in terms of policies for tech transfer offices and so on. We can talk about that later in the panel discussion if anyone's particularly interested. I'd just like to add one more thing to the staff entrepreneurship side, which is to make the point that this is a long-term game. So I mentioned Circassia, a startup from Imperial, which I was tangentially involved in. This is a timeline of that organization. So there was a lot of research which went on with the academics through the 90s. The first patent was filed in 94, 95. It took two decades, 20 years to get to an IPO. But it is now worth €1 billion, right? But it is a long-term game. And this is fairly typical in the biotech sector. So if you are investing resources, you need to make it very clear to your bursary or financial officer that they will not see a financial return for a very long time, if indeed ever. So that was staff. What about students? So student entrepreneurship is much more dynamic. In the UK, we have seen a doubling in the number of student startups in the last roughly 3 years. We've seen many more student enterprise societies, many more dedicated programs. And another very positive sign is that the 3-year survival rate, which is a kind of sign of quality, is also increasing. I should add, it's not all good news. Student startups are still having trouble scaling. So their kind of valuations, the kind of employment is still relatively flat, but I think we've got a few ways that we can tackle that. What should be done to stimulate this? So I think we need to do 6 things, and you'll be pleased to know this is pretty much my last slide. First, universities need to take enterprise, particularly student enterprise, much more seriously. And that means enacting formal policies, it means producing public statements of support from the senior management, and it means appointing internal champions who will defend student enterprise. Secondly, universities need to consider different kinds of innovation. So compared with staff startups, student startups are typically smaller, arguably a little less scalable, quite often a bit less technical. We see lots of digital startups as opposed to sort of hardcore IP ones, lots of social-rated ones as well. I think that means that universities need to consider the suitability of their technology transfer offices, many of which were set up to deal with primarily IP-centric, highly technical innovations. My third point is that universities should embed enterprise education across the curriculum, and I think FCT has done precisely the right thing here in integrating it within the master's course. Enterprise entrepreneurship, it should not be the domain purely of business schools, and this really requires a change in mindset in many universities. For far, far too long, entrepreneurship was seen as a subsidiary of business schools that had no business in the rest of the curriculum. I think those days are gone, and rightly so. Fourth, universities should focus on nurturing a rich enterprise ecosystem. So ecosystem is a word that's used a lot in the startup community, but with good reason. So rich ecosystems like MIT and Stanford have multiple overlapping enterprise societies and networks providing things like IP advice, mentorship, business plan competitions, hackathons, pitch days, and so on. So again, I think FCT is doing the right thing by linking up with Pt.1 and other components. You can't do this by yourself. Fifth, and this was a point actually that I didn't hear mentioned, but I would stress that universities should support alumni and leverage alumni support. So most alumni are tremendously well disposed towards student entrepreneurs, and they can offer a lot of support. So not just financial support. I mean, that's one component. In the UK, there's some very interesting work being done, crowdfunding, setting up dedicated crowdfunding sites which link entrepreneurs from university with students who want to create their new venture. But in addition to that, we should remember they can provide mentoring, connections, and so on. But yet, it's surprising how few universities have dedicated programs to link alumni with students. Incidentally, a small piece of work I did at Imperial showed that the peak year for student ventures was the year of graduation, but it remained quite high for 2 or 3 years immediately after graduation. So opening up university support mechanisms to those graduates in the years immediately after graduation would also be very valuable. And finally, this is my last point, I would make a plea to the universities to monitor and report back this information. In the UK, all the universities are required to report annually on information about staff and student numbers, employees, and so on. There are currently very few European equivalent surveys. And whilst this data collection is a pain in the neck, and I've been on the side of the university collecting this data, I realise it's a complete nuisance, and I'm sure Ray here has been doing the same for Dublin. It is a pain in the neck, but it really is important for 3 reasons. It's important for internally knowing whether you're improving. It's important for attracting industry partners, and it's also very important for getting the attention of policymakers. Policymakers need data to make decisions, and if you don't have the data to show them, they'll take you less seriously. So I think I'm probably over time, so I will wrap up. Hopefully I've given you my view about why university entrepreneurship matters and some things that we should do about it. I applaud you very much for running this event. Hopefully it will be one of many. With a different hat on, I was here in Lisbon yesterday talking about how different European cities compare for startups. And it's very pleasing to see that there really is an explosion of startup activity in Lisbon, and I very much hope that universities will be part of that. So, thank you.
Just any questions? I just,
Sorry.
Just ask the audience if they have any questions to... one of the questions that I have is one of the activities we are finding is linking more closely with the local accelerator that's Pt.1 over here. And because accelerators provide education more targeted to entrepreneurship, and universities are providing education in general. So there is a strong possibility for collaboration between accelerators and universities. Do you have any examples or any that you can state that in the UK how this kind of collaboration exists?
So it's a good question. You're completely right. I mean, there are lots of universities that historically have run incubators, which are not necessarily the same thing. That tends to be more about physical space. Many universities are then moving earlier in the process with accelerators and even pre-accelerators. So Imperial has done this. We had an incubator program that we ran for about the last 10 years. We opened a sort of accelerator, student accelerator, about 2-3 years ago, and we're now getting more into the sort of pre-acceleration. So I think you're absolutely right. There can be a very strong link there. What I would say, though, and apologies to those in the room who I know are running accelerators, accelerators, I think, are not the be-all and end-all. They're a very, very important part of the system, but you've got to look at all of the elements of that ecosystem. You've got to look at the alumni. You've got to look at making links with venture capitalists. You've got to look at the local businesses as well. But absolutely, yes, I think that there's tremendous linkage there to be made.